Hey guys, welcome back from spring break. Hope you all had a good extended spring break and that no one is feeling sick. And on that note, before we start, why don't we just have a word of prayer and then we're going to get right back into algebra and exponents. Yeah, it's so much fun. So, Heavenly Father, we just want to praise you and thank you for just bringing us back together. And Father, wherever two or three of us gather, you promise that you'll be with us. And even though we're gathering together on video chat or Facebook or however you're seeing me, then we just want to invite you. Please clear our minds and please help us to understand everything that's being taught today. And Father, just be with our world and be with our country. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen. So guys, way back on March 16th, we were starting the first section of chapter 8, which is over exponents. And of course, now you all have progressed to the point where we've done linear equations and we're starting exponents to get you into quadratic equations that's coming up. That sounds really technical, but it's not a big deal. What I want to talk to you about before we even go into 8.1 is I want you to look back in your algebra book. This is what it looks like in case you completely forgot, except yours doesn't say teacher edition. And let's go back to page 34, your very first chapter, 1.7, where it's talking about exponents. Because it gives you just a real quick page on where you can try to figure out what to do with exponents. The most important thing, and this is on a quiz, in fact, you are receiving a packet that has this quiz in it, and one of your quiz questions looks really similar to this, except it's using literal equations. That just means letters. I think it actually has X or it has an M in it. And it has a question that's very similar to this. So let's look up here and notice the difference between these two notations of numbers. So you have a -3 to the power of 4. This is basically telling you, hey, whatever you do to me, there's a -1 in front of me. So that means I can multiply 3 4 times and get an 81. But when I get that, there's still like a -1 hanging out saying, hey, make me negative. And that's what you do with this problem that looks like this. Now, when you have one where you have a -3 in parentheses, then that's basically saying, hey, you need to multiply me as a negative. And that's what you do here. And of course, what you might remember from chapter 1 is if you have an even number of power, an even numbered power, and then your numbers are negative, this number's negative, you're going to end up with a positive. For instance, all right, that probably totally confused everybody, but look what happens. If I multiply a negative to a negative, -3 to -3, I suddenly have a +9. Then I multiply this -3 to this -3, and then I suddenly have a +9, just so you can break it down and make it a little easier. Then I multiply the two positives together, and I have a +81. So that was just one thing I wanted to bring out, just so you might be able to understand that and get that in your brain a little bit better. And the good thing about videos is that you can always rewind and rewatch before you do this, maybe even right before a quiz. So now let's go back to 8.1. We did 8.1 on March 16th, but that's practically 2 weeks or a little more than what we did before. So let's just go back to it and let's do some lesson stuff. Now I'm going to tell you that me looking at my laptop, it looks backwards. So I'm trying not to look at it a whole lot because when I start writing stuff, it looks backwards. But then Apple flips it for you guys, so it should look right. If it never does, just give me a quick text or through your parents' phone or let me know and we'll try to work on that. So we're just going to go back to some lesson openers that we did way back on March 16th just to see if you can figure out what we're doing. So I have a literal equation here, which just means literally letter. So letters. We have an x, and we have x to the x cubed to x squared. What do I do? Remember, when you're multiplying letters, or multiplying the powers down here, then what, not the powers, but the root numbers, then what's happening to the exponents is the exponents are being added. So my base, that's what I was trying to come up with, my base, x is my base. When I'm multiplying bases, then and my bases are the same, because that's really important, then what's actually happening is my exponents are being added together. So if I was doing this problem, that would be x to the 5th power. So everybody got that. So that's just an opener getting into this. Some of you liked this, some of you didn't. Then we had one that looked like this. So we had a negative x, and then that one was being squared. Then we had another negative x, and that one was going to end up being cubed. And so think about what was happening here. Our base is a negative, but it's one of those that kind of looks like that other situation I talked to you about. This one is where I have to look at it, and I look at my exponents and I say, well, you know what? It's going to end up being an odd numbered power, or an odd numbered exponent, which means my base is going to end up being negative. So you could go ahead and say that. My base is going to be negative. And then I go ahead and add my exponents together. So that's going to be a negative x to the 5th power. And if you say, hey, we did this before, it's because we did do it before on March 16th, so I'm not completely crazy. I just want to make sure it gets back into your brain. Then another lesson opener that we did is we have a base of y, and y is going to be squared. And then out here to the other side, we have another power here that's to the 5th power. Now when I have a base that looks like this, then I'm not adding those. If you can remember, what we do is those are being multiplied. So that's going to be 2 times 5, which means my answer is going to end up becoming y to the 10th power. So we got that much done. Let's go to another one. I don't know why I keep writing these little numbers up here. Maybe it's so I can keep up with it. So what are we going to do with these? Well, the two big numbers, those are called coefficients. Remember that? Because basically, this just means that coefficient, these two guys are being multiplied together. Well, obviously, I can't multiply the coefficient to y, but what am I going to do? I'm going to multiply the 2 to the 3, and that's going to become 6. What happens to the y's? It would look like this. You would have a y with a little bitty 1, and then you would have a y with another little bitty 1, which means that would become y to the 2 power, or to be more professional, you say squared. So you have 6y squared for that one. We have another literal one, just so you can get in your brain what you're doing. So my last little lesson opener that we're going to do is x to the a power times x to the b power. And they just want you to say, all right, what's happening to a and b? My base is the same. Remember, you can't do this unless your base number, or your base letter here, is the same. What's happening to those two? A is being added to B. And that's all you can do, since this is a literal equation. You can't actually put A and B together and make them a family or anything. You just have to keep it like that. So what we did before you left is I gave you some homework, and you did some even numbered problems for this one. What I want you to do, just so you can get yourself back into this a little bit, is go back and see if you can do some odd numbered problems. Now, I do know that the odd number answers are in the back. So here's something that we just need to kind of talk about. Since there's no way I can monitor homework and how much you do and have you come up here and turn it in and do all that stuff, then you need to work on your own, which is a great benefit for you. There's all kinds of things. Mom and dad won't be there forever, so you do need to learn how to work on your own. But with that, when you're doing a quiz, when you're doing a test even from now until, quarantine time's over, whatever, till the end of the school year, then I trust you to just use your book and for that to guide you on your quiz and your test. Will that help you? Hopefully. Will it confuse you? Hopefully not. But just go ahead, use your book, don't worry about it. Do as much as you can and do the best you can, because these are really weird times. There is no way I'd be recording this right now if we didn't have to do this. So go ahead and try some of your problems that are odd and just see if you can get back into it. I'm going to look at your homework real quick, and let's just see if we've got one that's real big and hairy that we can just try to figure out together. So I'm on page 330, and this is chapter 8, 8.1. And I'm on page 330, just so you can see where I'm at. Am I still on the screen? Yes, I am. So let's look at page 330, and this is a terrible pen. Let me see if I can find a pen that will actually write. So let's look at 19 on page 330. So 19 looks like this. I have a -3. And then I have x cubed, and we have a y in there, and then we've got z to the 8th power, and then we're going to multiply all of that with a 2, and then we've got another problem over here that is a -5, x cubed, let me make sure that's cubed, and then we have a y, and then we have z to the 6th power. So let's take this step by step. The first thing that I really need to do, and if you remember way back when, we had this thing called PEMDAS, where you did parentheses, exponents, then you multiplied and divided, whatever came first, left to right, or you added and subtracted, whatever came first, left to right. So let's look at this one. The first thing I need to do before I go try to multiply this to this is the exponent. So I'm going to go through here, and I'm going to first of all multiply the exponent. So let's think about here. If I square the -3, that's a -3 times a -3. Negatives times negatives make positives. So 3 times 3 is going to become a 9. Then I have this, this is telling me to multiply it. Remember, when I have a parentheses, it looks like that. That's telling me to multiply that power by that power. That's going to become x to the 6th power. What's happening to y? Y is just getting squared. There's basically like a little bitty 1 there. There's a little 1 that's just saying, hey, I'm y. Because remember, if you have an exponent of the 0 power, it's just a 1. You remember when we used to say, hey, I could be a millionaire? Okay, I'll be a billionaire. To the 0 power. And that just meant I had, sorry, you can't see that. That just meant I had how much? That meant I had $1. I don't think I even have $1. So, oh well. But you don't have to worry about that. So don't worry about the 0 power right now. Just trust that that y being there, it has a 1 with it. So I'm going to multiply the 1 to the 2, and that's going to become y squared. Then I'm going to multiply my power of 8 to the 2, and that's going to become 16. Then I'm going to bring all of this back down. And now I'm going to go ahead and we are going to multiply these together. So I'm going to multiply the 9 to the -5. That is really serious multiplication tables there. That's going to be a -45 because remember, if you got a negative multiplied to a positive, it's always going to be a negative. And then hopefully you know your 5 tables. Those are the ones that were easier. What's going to happen to the 6 and the 3? That's where my exponents are being added. So I have an x. I'm going to add the 6 to the 3. That's going to become a 9. And I'm checking myself to make sure we're doing it right. And then let's look at what we've got here. I have y squared and then just y. To there's basically a little 1 right there. So what happens? That little 1 is going to be added to the 2. So I have y to the third power, which sounds stupid, y cubed. That's y cubed. And then we have z, and z's big mama power. You've got a 16 there, and then you're also going to add, right? We've got 16, and then we're going to add that to the 6. So 16 plus 6 is going to end up being z to the 22nd power. And that's correct. That's what your answer is for 19. So hopefully that will get you started. I don't think you probably did this, a majority of this homework before you left. But just to give you a clue as to what you're doing on your test and on your quiz and some of these things coming up, that's kind of what we did in 8.1. Now, let's move on to 8.2. So 8.1 was products, which means the literal equation or the letter coefficients were being multiplied together, and that meant my exponents were being added together. And we can, remember we kind of did this, I like to do this a little bit so you can kind of see what happens. So if you think about it, if we had something that looked like this, x squared times x cubed, technically what was happening is I had 2 x's over here, right? I had 2 x's here, and then I had 3 x's over here being multiplied together. And then I would count, how many x's is that happening? And then, 5. You remember doing that when we first started doing some of this stuff? Maybe, maybe not. So let's look at what we're doing when you are when you're doing quotients. Quotients isn't products. Quotients is going to be division. So let's look at some division. And I'm going to take something that's really similar to that. So basically, with division, we've got just a baby problem here. And let's see, we're going to set this up so you can kind of see what's going on. So remember, this is the number that's being divided by this. If I was going to set this up into a fraction, it would look like this. But if I was going to set it up into an even weirder fraction, then this would be the equivalent. I would end up having like x times x times x times x times x. And then I would have that on the bottom, I would have what? X times x. And let's think about what would happen. Basically, you could think, all right, x is going to go into x 1 time. And you're still going to have this like 1 under here. So let's just kind of think about it. Or what we did with fractions and stuff like that, we're canceling out. Going to cancel out these 2 x's, but there's still a 1 under here, because if we get a 0 under here, we're in trouble. So then these 2, x is going to go into x, and I've still got this 1, but you know that's fine. How many x's do I have left? 1, 2, 3. I have x cubed, right? Well, look at actually what was happening with those exponents, because we know x cubed is supposed to be our answer. What's happening to those exponents, and you all might remember this, is those exponents are being subtracted. So the exponent 5 minus 2 is becoming x cubed. Do you remember kind of doing this way back when? Maybe, maybe not. So let's go on to our next, just our little, kind of our little refresher course right here. So here is just another little lesson opener we're going to do. So we have x cubed and x cubed, and here it comes, right? Well, technically what can happen is like, x cubed, you get into x cubed, so it's going to be a 1. Just like if you had something, if it was just 3 divided by 3, it would end up being 1, right? So you kind of know is going to be a 1. But let's actually try to subtract that. If I had x3 minus 3, then that would be x to the 0 power. Remember what I did earlier? We could all say we're billionaires to the 0 power because that just means you got $1. Well, that's what's happening here. If I've got x to the 0 power, it's one of those things I don't even think about it. I just go ahead and say whether it's x to the 0 power, whether it's 50 billion 100 to the 0 power, that is going to be a 1. So that's a 1. We ended up with a 1. Let's look at a couple more to get you back in tune with what you're doing with quotients. So here we go. We've got 6y to the 7th power, and we have 3y to the 5th power. And what I want to do is, with these two numbers, I'm going to actually divide them. So with those two numbers, I want to actually divide them, and hallelujah, they divide evenly, right? They're pretty easy. That's going to end up being a 2. And then what's happening to my exponents? I'm subtracting them. So I subtract my exponents, and I'm going to end up with a 2 as well. So that's going to be 2y squared is my answer. Now, let's look at some other stuff. Let's see here. If I've got y squared plus 1, and then down here, I've got a y. Look at what's happening here. Because you initially want to say, all right, I want to just go ahead and I want to subtract that. That's probably what you're wanting to say. Why can't I just divide this into this? It's because, remember, there's something we don't want in the bottom of that fraction. And that's called a 0, and it's because it goes into all these difficult imaginary situations that we really don't want. So what we're going to say with a problem that looks like this, whoa, getting a lot of glare. Hold on, moving over. Okay, what we want to do with this one is just say, there's nothing I can do, because if anything I do, I'm going to end up messing it up. So what you need to, when you see a problem that looks like this, basically if you've got a y squared and you have a y down here by itself, you're going to have to leave it like that, because you're not going to end up with a 1, which would be wonderful and nice. You would end up with basically a 0 that you don't need. So this one is already simplified. So already simplified. And we did some of these back in the day, but maybe you have totally forgot about that. Now, we also had these problems where you had this negative exponent. And once again, if you want to go back to 1.7, you can kind of read what that is. If you have a negative exponent, and especially if it looks like that, you don't want to leave it like that. You want to make it, there's so much negativity in the world. You really don't want to leave your exponents negative if you can help it. And so we're going to make it positive by flipping it. Remember doing this? If I don't want a negative exponent, and we definitely don't want fractions, some of y'all got fractionophobia, then what do? I'm just going to flip it and make it a regular x squared. So that was kind of a refresher course for you guys. Let's go back and let's try to do, if you want to move on, I have chosen one that's under example 3 that looks really similar to something that you've got on a quiz. So let's go to example 3 on page 334. And on 334, your lesson, I'm going to go, on your example, we're going to go to 3. Example 3C. Blech. That's like rhyming. It looks like this. Negative 3x squared. Right? And then, and that square is negative. and outside of it is a cube. So let's talk about what's happening to this. Well, first of all, that 3, the negative 3, is going to be cubed. And so that literally means that's the negative 3 times the negative 3 times the negative 3. That's what's happening to this. That's me cubing that, right? So what happens to that negative 3? So we got a negative 3 times a negative 3. They would become positive. And if it's a positive 9, then I'll multiply it again to the negative 3, and it becomes a negative 27. Or once again, you can use a rule of thumb. If I have an odd numbered exponent, and then my number that I'm multiplying is negative, that odd numbered power is telling me to keep it negative. Yeah, it's really negative there, man. So now let's go on and see what's happening to our x's. So with our x, my cube is going to be multiplied to my negative square right here, which means I end up with a negative 6. So you think, easy peasy, I'm done. Remember what we said about negative exponents? In a world of so much negativity, you don't want to leave your exponents negative. So just how we did the other one and we flipped it and made it into a nice one, this one we're going to flip it and it's going to be a fraction, but it's going to be okay. So let's look at what happens. I'm going to separate 27 from its coefficient for right now. And what I'm going to do to this one is, if I don't want to leave the 6 negative because it's such a downer, so basically what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to do this so you can see, because some of you hate fractions, but let's just go ahead and put this negative 27 over a 1. And then I'm going to keep my coefficient going on over here. Coefficient just means we're multiplying each other together. And then I'm going to flip it. I'm going to put this, say that right now, this negative 6 is just like this, and it's hanging over a 1. But I'm going to flip it to make my 6 positive. So now I'm going to have 1 over a positive 6. And then think about how that would end up looking. I would go ahead and multiply this to where my final answer should look something like this. Negative 27 to the 1 is going to be 27, and that's going to be hanging over x to the positive 6 power now. So that's how you do one that's kind of complicated but kind of weird that's looking like that. So hold on, I'm trying to see, is there something you need to look at that one? No, that one looks good. Do I have another one marked where it's not need to be? Yeah. So this one might be one if you look at the top of your page on page 335. Something that I just noted that before we get into homework and to quizzes and tests, but we might want to look at is if you've got a fraction up there, and this is using all literal things or all letters, that you need to recognize that that is telling me that that little bitty 1 that's with the A and with the B is being multiplied. So that would become AN to BN, right? And then let's pick a couple of numbers and just try to figure out. Let's make it 3 halves, and then we'll make our power 2, or we're going to square it because it's really easy to do. So what happens? That would become 3 squared over 2 squared, right? And then if I go ahead and take out my multiplication, that's going to become a 9 over a 4. So that's just to make sure, hold on, Schoolcast coming through, going to stop it because I'm sure that your parents are already reading it. All right, so let me look through. I'm going to let you guys work through your examples. They're right there. The book's already done it for you. What I would like us to do is let's get started in some of your homework from now until quarantine season's over, which might be, and we don't know when. Just go ahead and use the odds. That way you can check yourself. I'm also going to say something that probably math teachers would never say, but if you're having struggling with math, there is an app that your parents could put on their phone, or you could put it on your own phone, that's called Photo Math. But don't just ask for the answer. Ask them to give you steps so you can look at it step by step. Now, that you're in the perfect grade for it. If it was like a higher mathematics, you know, imaginary numbers and all that stuff, it probably wouldn't work. But that would be perfect for you guys, just to look at it step by step. Please just don't do it on your test or on your quizzes, because that's rather unethical and you shouldn't do that. But, you know, to use it to get to be able to learn, that's perfect for stuff like that. So let's look at your homework. So your homework is going to be, let's just say 1 through 39 odd. And then we're going to start working. We're going to work a little bit from each section so you know what you're doing. So your homework is on pages 336 and 337. Nope, it's just 336. And we're just going to do the odd ones, 1 through 39 odd. I don't know if I wrote it out there, but oh well. 1 through 39 odd. And let's look at a few of these. Okay. I feel like you know how to do that one. But let's just look through here. I think you know how to do that one. Well, let's just do 1 and let's do 5. And we'll do a couple from each section and until we get to a stopping point, and hopefully you'll be able to get it. So if we just start out with number 1, if some of you have already written down number 1, or you're looking at number 1 and you think, I can't even get started. Let's go ahead and look at it. This is what number 1 looks like. And let's think about what we're doing. My 2 numerical coefficients, or the 2 numbers, are just going to be divided. And it's a pretty easy division problem. 18 divided by 2 is going to be 9. What happens to the exponents between these two? The exponents between those two is going to be subtracted. So think about it. You've got x, and then you have 7 minus 2. So remember, this one's the top. That's what you're going to be subtracting from. So that's going to end up becoming 9. The answer to number 1 is going to be 9x to the 5th power. All right, so we did 1. I feel like you all could get that one. And 5 is one where we're flipping it. If you look at 5 and say, I have no clue what I'm doing on number 5. Everything looks good except it's really negative, and we should never leave somebody in a negative state if we don't have to. So we're going to flip him and make him into z squared. And when I say flip, that's what we literally did. He was a fraction, and so we flipped him up here and put the 1 underneath. Because remember, technically, every number is standing over a 1 or being divided by 1, unless it's really, really weird. And you are not getting into that in this algebra lesson. So that is 2 examples from exercise A. Let's go to exercise B and see if we know what we're doing under that one. So I'm just choosing 20. If you hate getting your stuff out of order, then you could come back and maybe, listen to the whole video and then do these problems in order as you're doing your other homework. But remember, I am not checking homework. It reveals to me how well you did on tests and quizzes. Kind of tells me if you did your homework or not. So let's look at, let's see here, y to the, where is it? Y cubed, y to the negative 5th. Then we have 2x and then negative squared. So if we're looking at 20, there's some things we have to do before we can start using all this magical type stuff that we like to do. So think about what's the main problem that I've got to deal with in 20. So in 20, I do have a negative, But the negative's up here, so I'm not as concerned about it. What I am concerned about is this little booger, who is a negative down under there. And I want to keep him positive. So think about, and then that also is going to help me out because I have a base of x and this is a base of x. So let's think about what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring this little guy up to the top if I can. I'm looking down here. So I'm going to keep the x cubed. I'm going to keep y to the negative fifth. This guy, I'm going to flip him. So he did look like this. Hold on, let me see if you all can see that. He did look like that. I am going to flip him up to the top with these guys. See? And so I'm going to bring up 2, and I lost my place again, 2x. And then now my little negative 2 is going to be a positive squared. So he's positively squared by now. Now I can start, I'm going to fool with my exponent first here, because think about what that's telling me to do. So that is telling me that I need to go ahead and just square this guy. So I'm going to 2, that's going to be 2 times 2. Remember, our numbers always go to the very front, so that's what I'm going to start doing here. So technically, I'm just going to write it all out how this looks. I've got 2, and this is going to be 2 squared. We'll figure him out in just a minute. I have my x. I have 2 bases of x here. One of those bases is going to end up being squared. So look, I've got a base here that's 3. This is going to be times x with a 2. See where I put the 2 with that? And then I still have, hanging out here, still being multiplied, is y to the negative fifth. And then we're just going to finish this out. Don't worry about this negative y. We're just going to let him hang out in his negativity for the answer for this problem, so if you're worried about him. So 2 squared is going to become 4. The 2 exponents here, remember those 2 exponents as are being multiplied together are going to add, so that's going to be x to the 5th power. And then y to the negative 5th is going to hang out there as well. Now, you could have answered him, guys, if you did, if you chose, wait a second, you told me not to leave him negative, so this is what I did. I ended up bringing him under here. That's perfectly fine, too, all right? Either way is going to work. It's just in my book, they just left it like that. So we did one of the weird ones under exercise B. Let's go to exercise C. Let's choose one more because I'm trying to keep your all's time somewhat limited, but you know, we could practically do all your homework all the time. Let's go. How about let's look at 29. It looks interesting. So 29 is still under exercise B. Well, yeah, all you're doing is exercise B. And then some of the more challenging ones you might do later. 29 looks like this. We have x squared, y cubed, and it's hanging over a y. And then all of that is being multiplied by a negative 2 exponent, or negative square, however you want to say that. Well, think about what is going to happen right off the bat to all of those. Basically, what ends up happening, and what we could do first of all is we could just, I guess, go all the way through it and see what happens. My book doesn't do that, but we could. That was going to end up being basically negative 4. That's going to end up being a negative 6. And this little person under here is going to end up being a negative 2. And then let's think then what's going to end up happening. So if we flip this guy to make everybody positive and everybody really happy, then we would flip the y up here. He's going to be y squared, no longer negative. Down here we're going to have x4, and he's happy because he's not negative. And then we have y to the 6, and he is all happy as well. Then let's start to think about what's happening with him. If we've got all of that going through and all of that negativity. Oops, sorry. We've got all of that going on, and it's all, you know what I did? I kind of did this completely wrong because I should have done what was in the calculator. I should have done what was in the parentheses first. All right. Sorry, guys. You know how I am. So what we should have done is we should have just done everything within here first. So scratch that. That would have just, I needed to go ahead and just subtract my y just to make my life really simple. Sorry. It was going off by what I was thinking rather than what I was doing. So if you check right here, what I did is I just went ahead and subtracted rather than trying to flip, do all this weird stuff. And then when I'm flipping here, we are going to do a flip here. Because what happens is when I multiply that, I ended up with a -4 and a -4. And to keep that positive, I'll go ahead and flip it into a fraction and make my end product look like this. So sorry, that was confusing. I regularly do that, so you know how I am when I'm trying to go by the fly. So that is your lessons. Your parents, majority of your parents have my text, my number. They can either message me through, I think this is going on Facebook, they can message me through Facebook, they can text me on my phone, or we are going to try to set up some type of conferencing or some type of even tutoring session. If you need that, just let me know. But I'm going to, that's the end of your first day, so this would be Wednesday, April 1st, April Fools. But this is the end of that first section. In your packet that went home today, you did have a quiz over these first 2 sections. Of course, that quiz isn't going to be due until you come back on April, whatever that date is, the following Monday. So that quiz will be due on April 6th. And on that day, you're going to get another quiz for sections 8.3 and 8.4. So tomorrow's lesson will be on 8.3. Friday's lesson will be on 8.4. And then you'll have that quiz will go home to you on Monday. So have a great rest of the day. Sorry it got kind of goofy and strange. Text me if you have any problems or message me on Facebook. I love you guys and we miss you, and have a good day.